keep your comments to yourself. We don't need to argue here. We're just here to learn about what's happening on the Hill. And so, thank you once again for coming. We're going to ask Craig Thorne with our VFW to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please, if you'll rise.
Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, by the way, we would like to recognize, if you are a veteran, please stand up. Any veterans in the room? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for your service. Air Force right here. Don't worry, we're working on it. So we would like to, if you are elected official that's not up here in the front, please just raise your hand. Let us know if any elected officials here. Okay, thank you so much for being here today. We'd like to give them a round of applause as well. So our moderator today is Kelly Stone. He works with MTech. He serves on our board of directors. He's been serving on our board for 8 years now. So he knows how things go, and we're excited to have him. I think he's been spending almost every single day up on the Hill since it started. And he got caught. We had Chamber Day on the Hill last Thursday. Does everybody know what happened a week ago Thursday? Okay, so we left from the Capitol at 3:30, and we got back to American Fork at 7 o'clock at night. So that's the longest commute I've ever made from downtown Salt Lake to American Fork. We could have been to St. George in that amount of time. But Kelly, he left 30 minutes behind us, and he also took 3.5 hours to get home. So I'd like to turn the time over to Kelly, and we'll go from there. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Josh. Also, first thing I'd like to do as we get going here is to thank our panelists here, the various representatives and senators, both on the federal and state level, as well as a member of our Board of Education. We'd like to have you introduce yourselves. And now, just by way of logistics, do we just have one microphone for all of you? Okay, I'm going to share. Are there two? Oh, it's just yours. Okay, Kristen has one. Everybody else. Okay, so I'll just share mine with this this half of the room. Okay, but I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us what's on your mind and kind of something you're hoping to talk about today. I'd love to hear that from you. Can we start over there with you, Representative Mike Kennedy?
Hi, Mike Kennedy. I'm the Congressman for Congressional District 3, and I'll say similar to last time, 2 weeks ago. First, it's a privilege to be here. I'm sad to actually say that a lot of people, when I show up to these events, are like, why is a federal person coming to Pancakes and Politics? And the answer is, I love this place, and I love being with you, and the pancakes are outstanding. I'll say thank you very much for the pancakes, and you and your team always do a great job. I've been coming here for many years and intend while I'm in town to continue to do that. And Congressional District 3, I do similar to last time. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock in another county that I have to get to, so I'm going to have to leave it earlier than I would intend. But so when I do leave and take a plate of bacon with me, don't hold that. So what's on my mind? There's lots on my mind, and maybe some of the questions will be oriented that way. But he didn't give a time limit, so you might want to do that with politicians. Yeah, because. So I'll just say, yeah, lots on my mind, but I'm more interested in what's on your mind so I can address those things. So I'll just turn it over to my senatorial colleague here, and we'll take the questions later.
Thanks, Mike. So Brady Brammer, I represent kind of northeast Utah County area. As far as what's on my mind, I don't know that I have something specific that I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to answer any questions. And I'm here to learn. A lot of times through your questions and your comments and the way that you respond to answers and questions, it really provides an amazing feedback loop for us to see if we're getting on the right track or if we're getting off track. And so these types of events are absolutely invaluable for us to do our job. And I know that a lot of times they're like, hey, ask your questions and you know, take your answers, but we're learning so much through the questions from you and how you respond to that. And so thank you for being here. It's a really important thing, part of what we do.
Good morning, I'm Cindy Davis. I serve on the state school board representing District 11, which is all of American Fork and surrounding areas here. Grateful to be here with you this morning. Grateful to the American Fork Chamber of Commerce for always doing a great job putting this on, and for our wonderful hospital friends here at IHC and their support as well. Eager to hear your questions and answer. One thing that I've been getting a lot of questions on lately is how are federal changes going to impact finances in education and or policy in education here at the state level. So that's been on my mind, of course, and I serve as the Finance Committee Chair for the State Board of Education. So also working with we got our PEA Chair here, our Public Education Appropriations for our state chair, Senator Balderee, and been working on that end as well here at the state level.
Hi, I'm Kristen Chevrier. I'm happy to be here. I represent Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills, and 2 precincts in Draper. And like the others, I am just interested in hearing what your questions are, what you're watching up on the Hill, and what you want to know. So I'm excited to hear your questions and see if we can answer them.
Good morning, I'm Christofferson. I represent Lehigh and American Fork. And, just maybe some thoughts that I've had just recently. We've talked a lot about, we've been talking about our budget and the appropriations. We finished our appropriations subcommittee work, and they're rolling that up into the executive appropriations to work on things. But one of the things that is tough to do, we've got to balance the budget, and our state is doing pretty good, maybe not as good as our projections, but it's still pretty good. But we're always balancing, what the needs are. There's lots of needs in education, lots of needs in transportation, in social services, and it's kind of a tug of war for dollars. So we're trying to balance that all out and still say, we don't want to tax the citizens anymore. In fact, we'd like to give a tax cut if possible. And, that requires us to sometimes look at our programs and say, what can we do to be more efficient? And maybe, kind of like a Utah Doge thing, we need to say, how can we do it more efficiently? Are there things that we really don't need to do that we can do without? So there's a lot of reflection on that right now, and that perspective helps us to make better decisions, I think.
Hi, I'm Senator Heidi Balderee, and I cover parts of 4 cities. I start in Draper and go down to Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and Eagle Mountain. I am excited to be here today because face-to-face communication is superior. Let's just face it. When a like or an angry face on social media, even a text is just not the same as this. So thank you for getting up early on a Saturday morning to join us and to talk face-to-face. This is my preferred method of communication. And I look forward to answering your questions, but also for the chance to tell you maybe some of the things that the media won't tell you. Because as we know, clickbait, right, whatever it takes to get that story, typically they're unfortunately negative. And while I would agree there's some negative things that are happening, there are a lot more good things that are going on right now. And so I'm excited to discuss some of those with you today.
Great, and I planned that, so I'd end up with my mic again, so, excellent. And by the way, folks, I do want to make sure that I, just in case I forget as we get going here today, to thank you for your service in that. This really is, the more I interact with these folks, the more I realize, you know what, they're real people. They're just doing their best job, whether you agree with them or not. Nobody's trying to do the wrong thing. They're all trying their best in difficult circumstances and with nuanced issues. And so I appreciate the efforts that you do. It's certainly not for the money and or the glory or the glitter bombs. And so we want to make sure that we do give you a proper appreciation for what you do. Hard to work on that. So Representative Christofferson brought up well, I was going to say the elephant in the room, but we may have some Republicans here. So the issue is that we got the revenue projections. We get two of them, one right before the session starts in November, and then another one, a revised version in February. That usually goes up and says, guess what? You got more money to play with. And this year they said, last year they called it the socks and underwear Christmas, and then February came along and we ended up with a little extra money to play with. This year they said, no, it's the Tide and Bleach Christmas. You're gonna have to just wash what you got last year. And then somebody was saying, the latest revenue projections were, no, you don't even get the Tide and Bleach, you better just turn them inside out and wear them again. I'm hoping that's as far as we're gonna take that analogy from here on out. The question is, though, we got some tough news on that. The revenue projections in November were it's going to be flat. You're going to get no new money to play with. Maybe a little bit, not much above zero. And then it just came in again that tax revenues were going to be down by $112 million. So it was a bit of a blow that way. So the question is, that's going to affect the amount you have available to spend. And how do you see that affecting any legislation that you care about here on the board? So, on our panel. And what I decided to do this time, we'll try it. I think the open format worked pretty well last time. If it stops working, then we'll add some extra structure to it as we go. But for now, let's just leave it open to those who have strong opinions on various issues. Who'd like to start with that? Okay, so Senator Brammer made eye contact, which is a biggest mistake.
So in terms of, so the question as I understood it is, we have a low budget year, and so how does that impact things? In so many ways, having less money makes doing our job easier. And that sounds kind of strange, but when you have a surplus, then everybody's grabbing at it, and there's a lot of fighting and everything that way. When you have less, you really get down to what are the priorities, and it really is what our job is supposed to be, which is making hard choices and prioritization. When there's too much money, it is not a good thing for government. So I don't have a ton of requests for appropriations this year, which is funding requests. I do chair a committee, the Criminal Justice Committee, and so what we've done on that, knowing that we had less money than typical, is we've gone to each of the agencies. We've said, look, if you have priorities that you really need funded, you're not going to have new money to fund those. You're going to have to find things within your budget, and if you go find that, I will fight for you to keep that within your budget, and you can reallocate it to what you prioritize. So that's the way that we've handled it, and so that's kind of how we've been going through that. So like the Attorney General's office, they identified $2 million of funds that they would just wanted to reallocate to a different program. It's awesome. I will fight to keep that in your purview. That's kind of how we've been dealing with it.
So I'm really jealous of my colleagues that are turning their underwear inside out because we're $36 trillion in debt in Washington, D.C., and we don't even have money to buy new sets of underwear or have a laundry process at all. So one of the things that's been really interesting to me, and I just say, I didn't say it earlier, but I have a great deal of respect for everybody at this table. These are good people, and I just trust that they're going to do their best. And we also have public servants out in the audience, and thanks for your service too. And the people that are here. Utah does it well. Our families and our communities, we can take care of these things. And I take seriously, 36 trillion, it's a number that nobody understands. But when people are, so what is on my mind, Kelly, as far as what goes on is, this week there have been protests all over the country about firings of federal workers, and people have been up in arms about Elon Musk and Doge. And my first question over and over to people that we talk to at a town hall on Wednesday is, what are we supposed to do about $36 trillion of debt? And the answer for many people is they just don't care. They don't think it's an issue. And as a result, so they want to see federal workers' jobs protected. And I say, they say these federal workers can't be fired. And I say, well, if the president can't fire, if the executive branch can't fire people, then who can fire these people? They just go on forever as autonomous agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is self-funded and under no control of Congress, created sadly by Congress in that way, Elizabeth Warren and so on. And I just say, this is nonsense. I mean, if the executive branch can't handle these things so that we can get some handle on our debt, then who's in charge? And the answer for these, they don't have an answer. I mean, I've asked these people a couple things. I've asked, what are we supposed to do about $36 trillion of debt? These people that are angry at me and Doge and Elon Musk. By the way, I'm part of the Doge caucus, but I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not Donald Trump either. I'm not, you know, I'm a member of Congress, but I'm a surrogate. So they'll attack me about these kind of things. So what are we supposed to do about $36 trillion of debt? Business as usual? We just kind of all go there and sit around and really do nothing, tinker around the edges and not get anything done? By the way, I'm committed. President Trump is committed as well, not to touch Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We're not touching those things. The second thing, people are all up in arms about all of the benefits that are going to be taken from them. And my next question back, and I've heard several of them this week, is what benefits have been taken from you? And the answer, when they're willing to stop evading and just answer, no benefits have been taken from them. And I'm not planning on taking any benefits from them, nor is President Trump. We've made public statements of it. So there's a lot of fear-mongering out there, it seems, and there's a lot of people that don't seem to care at all about debt. But I'm really proud of my state friends that are working diligently. I know we have a tight budget. We recognize that in the state level. We're willing to take this stuff seriously. And I'll just say to my friends, you better, because your Washington partners, of whom I'm now a part, they apparently don't seem to care at all. And the curse on our children and grandchildren, if we don't get a handle on these things, it will come home to roost at some point. I'm very concerned about that. So we've got to get this aircraft carrier or big, huge jumbo jet, whatever analogy of the United States you want to think about, we got to get it angling in the right direction. None of this is going to go away next week. I know we can't, nobody can fix all this stuff next week. But get this number. So if 10% of the federal workforce, and I'm hearing this week, there's 2.5 million people in the federal workforce. That excludes postal service and military. That's a lot of people. And if 10% of those people take the 8-month buyout, I mean, I've never had an employer that gave me 8 months buyout that I could go for 8 months and try to find another job and get paid full-time and have benefits for 8 months. I've never had that kind of generous benefit. If 10% of those people take that offer, our country can save $300 billion a year. I mean, that's just 10%. And you think, is there any fraud, waste, and abuse? Is there anybody in our 2.5 million federal workers that is not doing diligent, vigorous work? Is there one out there? Should we try to find the one? Is there $10 of fraud, waste, and abuse? Should we try to find the $10? And we're hearing all sorts of things as Elon Musk does the work. So, and then I'll just finish, Kelly, and I could go on and on. I don't want to take all your time, but I had some people on Wednesday tell me about Elon Musk's Nazi salute, the awkward wave, and I'm like, is there any proof that Elon Musk is a Nazi? This whole Nazi condemnation and the Nazis are there and that they're in the White House stuff. I'm like, really? Absolutely don't support the Nazis, but I've been taught, and I'll just say to my colleagues, if you ever run for federal office, you never wave in the front. You always wave to the side. It's a really weird wave. You can't, because if you wave to the front, there's going to be somebody that'll catch you in that wave, and they're going to say it's a Nazi salute, and you're part of the Nazi. It's like, really? Is anybody up here part of the Nazi party? I'm not, and I don't believe Elon Musk is, and these people, when I said that, they, oh, no, he's a Nazi. Okay, you know, the more you use that arrow in your quiver, the less reliable it seems, because if everybody's a Nazi, and you can't prove it. So there's these kind of things that come out, and I just think that's a lot of fear-mongering. But I'll just say on my part, I love to listen to and try to sort through the issues. And when it comes to $36 trillion of debt, I will take that seriously. But there's nobody in this room, no vulnerable people, that I want to see to take the hit on that. There are ways that we can work in the right direction without damaging those programs that our people depend on. And I'll go to Cindy, who I think is amazing. When it comes to school funding, Title I, free school lunch, and our necessary school funds that come out of federal government, absolutely. I'm deeply invested in making sure those children in those Title I schools are protected. Special needs children, But does the Department of Education, Washington DC, need to tell this nice person, our local and state school boards, what the curriculum should be? I don't think so. So that's something that's on my mind. And I'm proud of my state legislators who recognize that there's a limit to money, because Washington for many decades has not seen that limit at all. And I and others are trying to work on that in a positive direction. Cindy?
I'll just say thank you, and thank you for your commitment to our federal dollars really go to our more vulnerable students and not to the general population. So appreciate that. Just to your answer, Kelly, about your question about the shortfall this year for state funds and how that's going to impact. I serve on the state school board, and we have a precarious situation because we have to present our budget priorities before October 15th so the governor can put his budget together, but that's prior to when we get the revenue dollars. So we had one of the PEA chairs, not Senator Balderee, he called me to his office and he's like, what's the deal? Why are you requesting so much? And I go, well, because we don't know, and by law we have to do it by this date. So we've really tried this year when we've got the information back from public education appropriations. We have reduced funds less than we thought we did. We went back and reduced our priorities that we had asked for and said, okay, this is really what our most important things are this year. And we had some ongoing funds and some one-time funds that I made a hard motion in my board to support. Our legislative fiscal analyst said we probably should sweep these, and I had to make a motion to support that because it is a hard year. And we in Utah, in code, and correct me if I'm wrong, must balance our budget each year. That is a constitutional requirement. So it's important that we all figure it out and work together, and we're all gonna agree sometimes and disagree on priorities. There is one piece that I hope EAC tweaks a little bit, and our board did support keeping money for career and technical education. If our legislature is going to continue to prioritize, and this year we are seeing catalyst centers, first credentials, things like that. If we want those things and we're going to fund those things, we really need to rethink and fund the monies that go into elementary schools and middle schools to start introducing students to the fact that they will want to be thinking about someday. The goal of education is for students to be able to achieve all their personal goals that they want and to be contributing members of society. But it really also needs to be so that they can at some point get family sustaining work. And all of us are kind of working together on that, the governor's office, the legislature, and the state board, on how we do that, whether it's in a trade or whether it's through academia seeking professional. But there are some monies, this will go away, the monies to go into elementary and middle, and a lot of our high school, DECA, Future Farmers of America, Future Business Leaders, all of those things, the funding that right now typically goes to that is kind of recommending to be taken away. And out of all the 15 things, I supported taking all of them, but these few, if we're gonna prioritize Catalyst, First Credentials, things like that, it doesn't make sense to pull away the exposures that help kids have the introduction to these things, to want to participate in these things once they get to high school.
So, as the new chair of the Public Education Appropriations Committee, I just want to thank the Utah State Board of Education. In particular, it's as Cindy said. So I met with the chair of the board, Matt Hymas, and I said, look, this list of 10, because we had discussed the budget and the priorities of the USDE prior to the session, and then again closer to the beginning of the session. But their request did not match our fiscal realities. And so when I had this conversation with the chair, I said, look, you need to tell us what you want to prioritize. Otherwise, we're going to be forced to pick and choose. And they did amazingly well. Within 24 hours, they had pared back their list of 10 priorities to 5. They literally they cut it in half. And not only that, but they were able to reduce the numbers in each of those requests. So kudos to the board for taking this seriously and for helping us to help prioritize the things that they want. And I believe we honored that. And it was easy, and I wanted to honor because you respected the budget. And just, I want to say they've been great partners. And regarding CTE, I think this is a part of school that everyone loves the best. I know my kids did, I know I did. And while what she's talking about, there's some truth to that. I just want to say that the subcommittee did not see a reason to keep the carve-outs as separate items. The subcommittee passed a motion to change the statutes to allow local education agencies to use their general CTE add-on WP funding for these purposes if they were a priority to the local boards. So let's face it, every school is different, and they may not prioritize the same things from another school. And I think that's the right thing to do, is to allow them to use those funds how they see fit. That said, the CTE programs received a net increase in the base bill of $3.6 million, which moderate that reduction regardless. And if you've noticed that the Speaker of the House, his largest budget priority was this program, the Catalyst Center Grant Program that Cindy mentioned. And by the way, that has a price tag of $65 million. That was not funded, it was prioritized by the committee, meaning if the Executive Appropriations Committee can find dollars from somewhere else, this is a high priority. But I would say the overall direction and sentiment of the legislature is to support these programs, as evidenced by prioritizing this $65 million price tag item, even though there is not currently funds unless they pull from somewhere else. So that said, I just wanted to say that I'm very confident with my chair, vice chair, the members of the committee. We voted unanimously on this budget. So of course there were lots of negotiations and things behind doors and lots of conversations that were had to get to that point, but we voted unanimously on this budget bill. So regardless of what you hear, we came to consensus on the budget this year.
Excellent, thank you. And when you're talking CTE, you're speaking my love language, so appreciate that. I was going to ask a question about education, but we focused on that a bit. We'll come back to it, I'm sure. Okay, so I am going to exercise my my option to say let's try to limit our responses to 2 minutes or less, if we could, because I'm awash in questions up here. Folks want to engage with you, which by the way, kudos to everybody here for being that involved. The one complaint I hear more from legislators and any leaders, including members of boards of education, is involvement. Oh, and city councilors, council members. Nobody shows up, and so it's lovely that you have this and you're that engaged. So here's a question. It was very specific, but I'm going to generalize it a little bit. There are a number of bills affecting the judiciary coming out, and the Utah Bar apparently released a press release that they opposed a number of those. Wanted to hear your takes on that, and I assume we'll start with Senator Brammer, and oh yeah, and anyone else who wants to chime in.
Sure. There are a number of bills affecting the judiciary, so there's a few things that we need to make sure we understand. So the bar will oftentimes oppose things that are, because the bar is very much not a conservative body. Okay? The bar is largely composed of attorneys, which are traditionally liberal, living in downtown Salt Lake, which are traditionally liberal. So it's like the bar is the bluest of blueberries in our tomato soup of Republican Utah, okay? So you have to remember that. They're not gonna like anything that you touch with the courts. Couple of things. So I have a bill, SB 203, which is about standing. On the Planned Parenthood decision, what they said was, normally you have to have someone who's injured in order to bring a case. And on the Planned Parenthood decision, they said, yeah, they can't identify a single person who would be injured by the trigger law, which says no abortions except in the case of rape, incest, life of the mother, or abnormal fetal abnormalities. And even though they can't find anyone who would be injured in their organization, we're still going to allow them to bring this case. Okay. Now, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court dissented saying, you are doing something different than we've ever done in our jurisprudence, and you need to be careful. And so what my bill does is it says, if you're injured, you can bring a case. If you are an association, you can still bring a case, but you have to have somebody in your organization somewhere that might be injured by this. And that's a big deal because we don't want our courts to be, there's a lot of public interest groups that will put a lot of money into anonymous associational, where it's an association rather than a person, so that they can change the law through the courts, okay? So this is saying you've got to have a Utahn who has been injured to bring a case in Utah, because it takes a ton of resources to administrate those. And that's a big deal, not only in those types of cases, it's a huge deal in public lands cases. So when you have Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance or Sierra Club, they have to find a Utahn who cares. They can't just file suits. That's the point of the bill, okay? So that's a pretty standard bill. The next one is, when we have a law that is challenged. Now, we need to make sure that laws can be challenged for unconstitutionality, because we should have a healthy distrust of government. However, we also have to remember that our judiciary in Utah has the highest delta between in partisanship in the country. So our courts are far more liberal than our population, and our legislature is far more conservative than the courts. So the ability to challenge laws for constitutionality, what is more likely to happen is they're going to challenge conservative principled laws to try to get the courts to overrule the legislature. Fair enough, that is the role of the courts. But when that happens, there's two ways that something can be unconstitutional. It can either be unconstitutional based on the words, it's called facial unconstitutionality, or it can be unconstitutional based on how the law is applied. So that's called the as-applied constitutionality. Well, if we pass a law and it has never gone into effect, there's no as-applied because it's never gone into effect. It's only facially unconstitutional as found by the courts, okay? But what happens in a case like that is the court will say, we're going to stop this law from going into effect, and we're going to let it sit in trial court where they argue a hypothetical as-applied that has never happened for the next 2 to 3 years, okay? So what this says is, look, if you challenge a law on its unconstitutionality and the court finds that it's unconstitutional, you get a direct path to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not it's unconstitutional, okay? So it's still keeping everything in the courts, and they've gone neutral on that one at this point. A lot of these, they come out with bluster and they say, oh, we're opposing, and they send out a mass email to all of my colleagues that are my opposing counsel and all of the judges that I have to go in front of. It's a really horrible thing for me to do professionally, running legislation related to the courts. But at the same time, then they start to see the reality of what's going on in the legislature, why we're doing it, and they kind of never send another email saying, we've gone neutral because this kind of makes sense, okay? So there are other bills that are out there. Choice of Chief Justice. One of the things, I'll tell you the one case that, I don't want to take too much time on this. It's a big question. And so I could go on. Choice of Chief Justice. What that does is, rather than have the justices choose amongst themselves, which we've started to see voting patterns in politics so that they join opinions that they otherwise, based on their past judicial philosophy, would not do that. They're joining opinions to retain their position as Chief Justice or to jockey for that. So what under the constitutional, Article 8, Section 2 of the Utah Constitution, we have the ability by statute to determine how the Chief Justice is chosen. And so what we said is, we're going to do the same process that every other administrative agency has. Governor chooses, legislature goes through the confirmation process. Okay, that's how the federal Supreme Court chooses. So we're just modeling that. There's another one on judicial retention, and what this says is, oftentimes the courts say, well, we need to be independent. Unless you're evaluating whether we're doing our job, and then we're super independent, and we get to decide for ourselves amongst our own judges whether we're doing a good job. And we get to put out a report called JPEC, Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission, where we evaluate our own performance. Well, I would like to have a Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission that I can put on the ballot that tells everyone what a great job I'm doing as I have determined for myself, okay? And so what this says is, no, you know, we receive these complaints about judges where, you know, there are real victims that, you know, and real issues with judges that no one in the bar and none of the attorneys are willing to stand up and say, hey, judges, you got this wrong, because it will adversely impact their cases. Okay? And so what this does is it says, we have confirmation committee. When you're up for retention, you come back to a similar type committee, and we're going to put on the ballot whether we recommend that judge be retained or not. And you know, that one's probably the more controversial of all of them. But if you want to have checks and balances, you can't have the same branch doing their own check and balance on themselves. That's antithetical to the checks and balances. And so what we are trying to do is we're trying to build back in some checks and balances on the courts, because they're meant to be isolated and they're meant to be independent, but not entirely. Like our Constitution in Utah, all the time, throughout the entire Article 8 about the judges says, you go back to the legislature to determine how this is done, how that is done, how that is done. By the way, the legislature will control your budget. The legislature is meant to be the check on you. And so they are independent as to case-by-case basis, but in the overall pantheon of how you're going to look at a judge, how you're going to look at the court system, it is very dependent on the legislature, and our Constitution is constantly pointing us back to the legislature and the courts need to be on the same page for a lot of this stuff. And there's some cross checks in all of this. So
thank you, Senator. Okay, and as you can see, that's hard to fit into a 20-second soundbite, isn't it? So this is why it's important to reach out to your representatives, and so you can get some more nuanced conversation than you're going to get in a clickbait headline. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. All right, Congressman, any final words before you head out?
Thanks for having me here. You guys are great.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate you. Okay, there are a couple of questions here regarding various bills that affect the State Records Committee and grandma access, or grandma, depending on your preference on that. That's basically the rules that allow the public to see governmental documents. Anybody want to comment on those? Does that, one of them, it basically eliminates the State Records Committee and replaces it with a single appointee, and wanted to see if anybody had opinions on that one that they'd like to talk about.
So I can take either microphone. So I do have some opinions on this. I know that it's not very popular with a lot of people to do things that seem to limit public input. But on the one, there was HB 69, is it HB 69? 277. And 277. Okay, so on 69, it was changed a little bit in the Senate. And the reason it was changed is that sometimes there are people who bring grandma requests and they're bad actors and they're just stirring things up, and then they have been given the court fees, the legal fees, because they were there and there were legal fees. But what the change was in the Senate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand the change in the Senate is that the court will determine if there was a bad actor on either side, and then the bad actor pays the court fees. And what we have to remember there is it's not the government that's paying the court fees, it's you. You're the ones, if the government pays, it's the taxpayers. And so it's important that we have balance there and that we be able to determine whether there was justification for spending that money on the court fees because it's coming out of your money. What was the other part of the question? Okay, I did want to say something about the State Records Committee. So I have testified in front of the State Records Committee, and I will tell you that they are highly ineffective. There's nothing complimentary I can say about the State Records Committee. We brought a case before them, a woman who's a good friend of mine who was trying to get her own records through grandma. And she was denied multiple times, she appealed, and the Records Committee decided that her records were private and she could not have them. So that's how useful the State Records Committee is. And I know that it seems like it's a consolidation of power to bring it back to a single person, but that person is appointed after being vetted by several other people. And honestly, I can't see that it's a big negative because what we have right now is clearly not working. So I think it's worth trying something new. So Heidi wanted to say something too. So didn't you? Oh, wait.
I was just gonna say that this person is supposed to be someone who's trained and has a little more expertise in it than some of the committee members that were just selected for political purposes, so I think it's a good thing.
I just have a few statistics to share about the inefficiency of the committee. So in 2022, only 1 out of 48 appeals were heard within 73 days. Here's some more. In 2023, the average time from receiving a notice of appeal to issuing a decision was 156 days, half a year. There was a sharp increase in appeals. 2012, there were 72 appeals. 2013, 47 appeals. 2014, 81 appeals. 2022, 240 appeals. 2023, 177 appeals. And in 2024, 260 appeals. So Senate Bill 277 does not change or eliminate the public's ability to request government access to public records. It doesn't prohibit individuals from gaining access to government information and appeal decisions through the courts or an appeals process. It doesn't require any fees to submit an appeal. It does not remove the balancing test from the current statute. So continuing to rely on a volunteer committee without necessary legal training or bandwidth is not great. Based on recent audit findings and recommendations, Senate Bill 277 aims to improve the records request process by streamlining procedures and making it easier for Utahns to appeal decisions and ensure faster, more consistent outcomes. Also, this is new, many of you may not know, but the Media Coalition is supportive of efforts to craft a structure that is both efficient and fair and neutral, and I actually have a letter that we received this week. So I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about this bill, and with myself included. There may still be an amendment or substitute to this bill, but I feel fairly good about the direction that it's going, and I think once we understand what the bill does, we'll be better off for it.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, it wouldn't be one of our special times together without addressing housing issues. There's some questions relating to this, and I'll just throw a number of them out there, and you can grab onto any parts that you think are significant. One was, why the mandate to our cities for more high-density housing? What about the roads and infrastructure? High-density housing doesn't seem to be working for lowering housing costs. Are there any other solutions? What's the best solution for travel from east to west, especially? Any of those that any of you would like to address?
Okay, I can talk about the transportation part, I guess. The housing part, to me, a lot is just a free market issue. The government can reduce regulations and help with streamlining the process of getting into a house. But, the cost of housing, you gotta think about how hard is it to get a gravel permit for concrete and that goes into the houses, or our forests, they burn up, but they won't let us go in and harvest the lumber. So all those costs are going up. Our land, we've got 67% of our land is tied up with the federal government, so we're squeezed into this small, narrow I-15 corridor pretty much. Very little private land for building. And so those costs are going up a lot. And I don't know what to do other than maybe say we got to open up a few more, some of this federal land, BLM land that's just out there growing sagebrush. We could open that up a little bit. That doesn't mean we go into our monuments and our forests and things like that, but we've got BLM land right in the city. But as far as the roadways, we need to we're growing fast enough that we need to plan ahead fast and open up corridors that we can get from city to city, or even within the city. And I-15 is getting jam-packed. Pretty soon we'll have Mountain View corridor. That will help. But we've still got to look ahead and say, what is this going to look like at build-out? On the east-west route from Eagle Mountain to Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs through Lehigh and into American Fork, a lot of traffic goes that way. There's been a lot of discussions with UDOT and MAG and state leaders about saying, can we fix Pioneer Crossing? Can we widen Pony Express? Do we put a roadway out into the lake, in the north end of the lake? These are all possibilities, and these are all things and it may take all of those to satisfy the needs of the growth. But it is a big problem going east and west, and I feel, I'm glad I don't live out in Eagle Mountain, because it'd be a frustrating thing to have to fight that traffic all the time. So there are 3 big jobs, projects that are going on in that part of the area that will start next year, this coming summer, I think. It'll probably last 3 years, but that should ease a lot of the burden there, the congestion. But there's still more needs than that. We need to still keep planning more and getting ahead of that growth, not just in this area, but it's statewide. So lots of challenges. Anybody else want?
I'll just add really quickly that I met recently with former Representative Walder, who now is the Housing Authority for the governor, but and just suggested and wondered and suggested this to President Adams as well, but the legislature has put in some housing incentives for first-time home buyers and things like that, and I'm hoping there can be a little carve-out maybe for teachers or for other employees who have a consistent income, but maybe not as high as you qualify for a house. One, that the first-time home buyer doesn't have to be brand new construction. It could be a used home. And then the other one would be that it could be a first-time single-family home. So then you can get, for example, a teacher went with me. He's won all these national awards. He's a fabulous teacher. His wife they have 3 little kids at home, so they thought, well, maybe she could go to work, but they can't afford daycare because it's so expensive, so they're in a condominium with their 3 little kids. But if you could get some of these folks that have a consistent salary and move them into a single-family home situation, then you could free up a lot of our other lower-income housing as well.
Eagle Mountain has a program like that, so if you want to talk with Melissa Clark, yes, they're free to do those. But one of the things this is a multi-pronged approach. there's some federal ideas that I think deserve merit, and one of them is the Houses Act by Senator Mike Lee. And basically, most of us are aware that 2/3 of our state land is owned by the federal government. And what his act proposes to do is to take 1% of those federally owned lands for affordable housing. And there would be criteria that you have to meet. They would be deed restricted for 15 years. 1% of federal land, it would double the housing availability in the state of Utah. So, there are ideas from all over. And if you've got a great idea, don't hold it in. Please share it with your federal and local and state reps. The county level, if you've got ideas, this is gonna take everyone. I would say about transportation, and as we all know, the Olympics are coming in 2034. And with the Olympics, again, I worry a little bit about the economic cost to the state, but there are some benefits, obviously, of having them come as well. One of them would be that I think that we will be receiving an influx of some federal funding that I hope we use to accelerate some transportation projects, that not only for things that are going to help with the temporary event that will come and go, but that will help benefit the lives of Utahns after the Olympics are over and beforehand. So if you look at the Utah Department of Transportation, if you look online at their website, they have different projects that are in what they call phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is basically 0 to 10 year projects, phase 2, 10 to 20, and phase 3, 20 to 30. On that phase 3 is something that I would love to help with the east-west corridor things, which would be a suspension bridge across the lake. Many of us have been in Saratoga Springs long enough, if you've been Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, to remember the fires, the floods. And it's an unsafe situation to be where we're at, for those of us who are there, or if you happen to be visiting family there when something happens, if the big one comes, we need more ways to exit. And while I'm not in favor of islands, that was a past idea, I'm not in favor of that, I absolutely favor a suspension bridge across Utah Lake.
Great, thank you. Something else to consider that I've heard from a lot of my city folks, city friends, is that there are a lot of lots out there that have already been permitted, and the landowners are still just holding on to them and not building on them. And there's only so much you can do with private property rights, but that's another consideration to put into that difficult mix. Thank you for that. Let's go back to an education issue, and that is there any legislation being considered or programs or general emphasis on school safety, specifically around bullying or fighting at school? Or things you would like to see?
There are some big initiatives legislatively this year and last year around more like kind of school hardening and protecting of school violence and situations like that. I will say a lot of people think that our biggest complaints at the Utah State Board are these certain hot topic issues. They aren't. By and large, our complaints are number one, special education, but then bullying, and then coaches, playtime, treatment of players, things like that. So those are a lot of the issues that we deal with there. So we do have board rules in place. There is code in place that talks about school safety and well-being and bullying and all of this. Is it an area that we definitely can continue to improve on? Absolutely, and we need to. When I call constituents during just cold calling, again, you think you're gonna get these hot button issues they're gonna say. Mostly they say, how are you gonna keep my kids safe in schools? That's what they wanna know. So I appreciate the legislature and Representative Wilcox. I think there's been some movement this year to make the requirements more feasible, because they weren't necessarily feasible under the price tag of $800 million, and no fiscal note. It was like, how do we actually get this accomplished? But there's been a lot of work this year to make it more feasible and provide a little bit more funding for that. And then along with that, we have to emphasize, and we do try to do this at the State Board of Ed in our trainings and professional development that we do out in the field, that the bullying and the well-being piece is an important part of school safety, as important as what we're doing to make the facility itself more secure.
So I want to divide this into two answers. The first is the school safety piece with regards to shooters and things like that. I'm a little concerned with the state getting involved in this space. I think it's we usually have the local schools control their capital improvements, meaning their building of buildings. That's what your property taxes go to, and their design should be up to them, and they should take into account the school safety. I'm not sure that a one-size-fits-all from the state and the requirement side coming down. It turns into, in many ways, an unfunded mandate or an issue where, to be honest, I oftentimes wonder if in those school scenarios, if we would be better off providing a very robust training program for teachers to participate in, and having a really big sign that says our teachers are armed and dangerous. And if we get more bang out of our buck for that, in something in that sense. And so I have a problem and a concern with the fiscal impact of the school safety side and whether the state should be involved in that as opposed to the LEAs, and us providing more resources to the LEAs to make those decisions for themselves as to their priorities. But then there's the other piece of bullying and in-classroom issues. And the concern and the criticism that I have, I've got kids in the public school system, and they inherited my smart alecky mouth, which means that they're, they've got smart alecky comments, and they're going to get in little scuffles with other kids and things like that. Okay. But there's been multiple instances of bullying where I go into the school, Nikki goes into the school, and we say, hey, we know the law on this, and you're supposed to document these instances of bullying. And they don't. And we say, we'd like the report of each of these bullying instances because we received calls from you reporting that bullying happened against our child on this day, this day, this day. We have the emails showing that you did this, that you reported this to us. We'd like to see that you recorded it and that you're managing this how state code requires you to do so. They have never, ever had the required, the enforcement arm is not happening appropriately in our schools with regards to bullying and record keeping with bullying. And what ends up happening is we can tell that they go in after the fact, and then they basically, it's kind of a passive aggressive smack back when you ask for those records. And it's all in one narrative that they did that day, okay? So we've got a problem on enforcement of the laws within our schools. They oftentimes ignore the statutes and they resent the statutes, and it's really frustrating. And then they go to the state board, and we get a little bit, and the state board tries to do some things, but sometimes the state board says we want to be collaborative, when what they really need to be is they need to come down hard and say, you're not following the law, you need to follow the law. You need to record your instances of bullying. Because when you don't, that's how you get the Department of Justice going into Davis County and Alpine School District saying you have engaged in discriminatory behavior because you did not keep records when things were reported to you. You did not share records as required when they were reported to you. So, that we're concerned about the enforcement arm within our schools as to whether they follow the statutory framework and the rules that the state board puts out, because our schools sometimes seem to be, actively ignoring what they are supposed to do.
I was wondering if that would get a response. Here we go.
I just want to say, I've been a teacher and I've been a principal, and I will say from my perspective, from me and my colleagues, nobody was intentionally trying to ignore a law. It is also subject to interpretation, because if one kid makes a smart aleck comment and it hurts another kid's feelings and they start crying, is that something that should go in a bullying record that's going to follow that kid wherever they go after that everybody's going to see? And you have to use a little bit of judgment. I will just say, for me, a place that I found consistency as a principal was on the first time someone does something smart aleck that hurts someone else's feelings or whatever, it's a teaching moment. We teach it, we talk about it. 90% of the time, that takes care of it. But then there's the other 10% of the time where, second time kid in my office, that's a pattern. We talk to parents, record it, and then we start recording from there. So I think, there is some amount of subjectivity, because what constitutes bullying to one is different to another. And, my own daughter will tell you that I gave her in-school suspension because she hurt another girl's feelings by saying her writing needs to be neater. And she said, but Mom, her writing is messy and you can't read it and I have to work with her. And so for her, it wasn't a bully situation, but the little girl was in tears. So you have to balance the needs of the students and the parents and whose opinion is what. But there are extensive records that are out there that we have seen and monitored. I mean, I kept them. I know a lot of my colleagues kept them. I could go in the AS400 and read a bunch of them for a variety of students. So yes, are there some that maybe are not as extensive as others, and that needs to be addressed? Perhaps.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears. I'm not going to talk about the bullying. I just wanted to report back because I had a visit from some of our school board members with concerns about the state mandating certain standards for protection of the outsides of the schools. And what they're requiring, or they were requiring bulletproof glass, or at least a kind of glass that prevents the bullets from coming through for 6 feet up. And now they're requiring it all the way up. And I just wanted to report back that the reason they're requiring it all the way up is that they have toured schools where they have had bullets that have come through on the 3rd floor. So I don't know whether that's right or wrong, and I don't know what the financial impact is on the schools, but there is a concern that there is a possibility for bullets to come through the window on the very top floors. So I spent time with the people who have done the research and with Representative Wilcox, and they had some pretty compelling reasons for what they're requiring. So I would love to talk with you further about it.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about voting, shall we? There is HB 300, that's the amendments to election law. Got a couple of questions that are revolving around that. And they wanted to, folks wanted to know, what problems is that solving? Is there a problem there that actually needs to be solved? How does that protect the elderly and disabled residents and make it easier for people to vote and participate? I think that was meant to be a little backhanded, but wanted to get your take on the new voting legislation.
I would like to comment on this. So there are a whole bunch of election bills coming through right now. The one that I've had the most emails on is HB 300, which has been circled for the last 2 weeks because they've been working on different amendments to it. The problems that are being solved are the fact that there is there's a huge problem with verifying signatures on mail-in ballots. So we had a legislative audit, which I'd be happy to send to anyone who's interested, that showed that there were a lot of problems. We also had dead people voting. There are just a huge amount of problems that happen when you're not verifying who is turning in a ballot. So last I heard, and I know this is in flux, HB 300 was trying to address the signature issue and verification of ballots. And so what it was requiring is that we would mail the ballots, and I'm using we loosely, I have nothing to do with mailing the ballots, but the ballots would come to you in the mail, and you would have time to peruse them, to discuss them with your family, do all your research, fill them in, but in order to turn it in, you have to show ID. And I know some people feel like that's really onerous, but it's actually very necessary to protecting the process and to verifying that we actually have people voting who are registered to vote, who live where they say they live. And the other thing with the mail-in ballots is that we have ballots going out to homes where there actually the voters no longer live. And I know firsthand that there are people who fill out those ballots and turn them in even when the people don't live there. So there are a lot of problems that we're trying to address. As far as the elderly and people who are housebound or whatever, that's one of the things that they're working on, some way to verify who they are and to get them a ballot without causing them too much problem. But I think that there are problems that need to be addressed, and that is what all these election bills are about. And if you pay close attention to the way they're written, if you read them and talk to your legislators about issues that you see with them, we are trying to make it as easy as possible for actual registered voters to vote and to be verified. So that's the intent.
Do you want to address the withdrawal from Eric at all?
Yes, so I actually ran a resolution on this at the state convention. Oh, ERIC is, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an organization, it's a third-party organization that takes Utah's voter data, including the people who are private voters, who didn't want their information shared. All of that is sent to this third-party group. It's run out of somebody's home. There are 2 employees, and they have access to all of this data. The theory is that they take the data and compare it with data from other states and make it so that we can know whether people are voting in multiple states. It's not really working out that way. We're paying them to take our data and giving them data that they really shouldn't have. We shouldn't be giving them information, well, anybody's information to a third-party group, but especially the information on people who are private and who need protection, that should not be shared between states. Also, there are states that are in ERIC that don't share their information with us. So what that bill is doing is trying to get us out of that system so that we can look at other solutions to this problem and come up with a solution that's either in-house, where we're examining our own data, or find a solution that where we can work with other states. Most of the red states have pulled out of ERIC already. So we're one of the few that is lingering, and I think we should get out and find a better solution.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Senator Balderee.
Just briefly, for the disabled community and our overseas military personnel, we have the option of blockchain voting, which not everyone does. And so I would just say, if you haven't looked into that, tell your friends and family about it. We're pretty unique that way. Blockchain voting for our overseas, it's a pilot, yeah. So for our overseas, so before blockchain voting, our military members had to email their votes, right? They had to waive the right of a secret ballot. So it's a great way, and again, we're unique in this ability, Utah County and specifically. So I would just say look into blockchain voting through Utah County for the disabled community and for our overseas military personnel.
So just to add to that, there's another option that we're looking at is where people who are homebound or overseas or whatever can, before they leave, they can register, pre-register kind of thing, just an opt-in saying, I want to be able to mail my ballot in, they'll check their signature or whatever. I don't know the details on that, but they're just saying, we're looking at another way that people can come down and make sure their IDs are verified, and then when they vote, if they're not in town or not able to make it during the vote, they can send that in and it will be accepted. So there's options being looked at.
That's actually for anybody. You can still do absentee balloting. That's not being taken away. It's just a matter of verifying that you are actually a voter, and then you can get an absentee ballot. So you don't have to be old or infirm for that.
Excellent. Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we give you a chance to give any parting thoughts. I do have a number of other, there's a lot of questions up here that we just didn't have time to get to. Things from about the flag display amendment, about illegal immigration, about multiple paths to the primary. But let's try this one. Would each of you explain your vote and justification for HB 267? It's the bargaining with public unions that is no longer available for public employees.
Thank you for asking that question. I was hoping we didn't go today without saying it. For those of you who don't subscribe to my email newsletter, you can go to the le.utah.gov, click under Senator, click under my picture, and subscribe there. You can follow me on social media, but this is a great opportunity, so thank you. First of all, I would just like to say that there's a big difference between a private union and a public union. If you look at, like, let's say the airline industry, where they negotiate for things. If they know they push too hard, what happens? The company no longer becomes viable and they lose their jobs. So they know not to push back too hard. It naturally regulates and balances itself. When unions were introduced back in Roosevelt's day, they were only intended for private unions. So I am not a fan of public unions, and I'll say that openly and candidly. I'd also like to say that, a lot of people are up in arms thinking that we've taken something from them. I will just say that there are only 3 unions in the state of Utah that have ever used the power of collective bargaining. Those are the Salt Lake Fire Department and the Salt Lake Police Department, and the UEA. Alpine School District, the biggest, has never used it. Those are the only 3 in our state. So when they say we're taking it away, they've not done it. Most people use, what is it called, consent and confer. They use basically how we negotiate. It's much more, they haven't needed it. And what we've seen, I've grown up in places. I'm a political economic refugee from California, and I also lived in the state of Washington. In the state of California, I've seen how public unions have bankrupt cities. In the state of Washington, I've seen it destroy budgets because there's no pushback. And I love our union employees, but we're not taking unions away. But what we are doing is taking away the power for someone to decide. As taxpayers, we represent. When they come to the table, they're using your taxpayer dollars to bargain. And so and it just continues to grow, and it gets to a point where it's unsustainable. And so what I will say is, I think we've done really well. I have no doubt that we will continue to fund our firefighters, our police officers, our teachers. We've done a lot for them, and I know that we will continue to do so. They've been successful, but I also don't want to put everyone else on the hook. So I probably said enough, but I'm going to turn the time over now to my colleagues.
Yeah, thanks. So there were some other problems with the union. There were some members of the union who weren't public employees. They were administrators of the union. They're the union reps, that they were getting retirement benefits from URS, and from Utah Retirement Systems. That's the state retirement. You have to be an employee of the state to get that, and we were allowing them to get on union the retirement benefits. How many other organizations did we allow that? None other. Also, access to schools. If someone wants to come and have a meeting like we're doing here today at the school, they would charge a fee, but they were allowing the unions to come in and do that, use public assets for private purposes. or school time or school resources, such as computers and things like that to do their work. So what the bill did is said, we're gonna treat you like any other private organization. You can still represent the employees, you can still get fees from the employees, but we're not gonna use public resources to make that happen, because we don't do that with any other organizations. If I'm selling life insurance, the schools don't just give me the ability to come in during school time and talk about life insurance, or if I have a meeting on that, they would charge me, and that'd be fine. But so those are some other things that we wanted to do, but it doesn't eliminate the union. It doesn't prevent them from representing the employees. There's like if there's a problem with what's the word I'm looking for? A disgruntled employee that has a problem, union can deal with those issues. So that's another part of it. They want to clear. This bill wanted to clear up.
So I have a little bit of a different take on it. Kay mentioned the use of public buildings. When I have tried to use public buildings, I not only have to pay a fee, but I also have to provide insurance, which makes it impossible for a private citizen to use a school building. I was never able to use them for my events that I was doing because of the exorbitant cost. So that's just one thing on that. But as far as one of the things that I've heard from people a lot about this bill is that now teachers or whoever don't have a voice. And what this bill actually does is it opens it up so that there can be more voices representing more people. So for example, I have a daughter who is not a member of the union, but she's a teacher and she's not represented. And when she's asked whether she can be involved, they say only if you join the union. Like, can I have a voice in this? No, only if you join the union. And so what this does is it allows somebody like my daughter to just say, hey, I want to go negotiate on behalf of people who feel like I feel. And so she can do that. Now, I've had people look at me and say, we can't do that. How does anybody represent themselves? But you're talking to me. I did this because I felt strongly about an issue. So I gathered people, thousands of people, and I went to the Capitol and I advocated for issues that I felt strongly about. And we've passed bills and we've killed bills and we've done all kinds of things without a union and without being paid. I didn't get any retirement out of it. So if you feel strongly, you can do this. And so I would encourage you, especially if you're one of the people who wasn't represented by the union, to now move forward and make your voice heard. That's what this bill is for.
I did not vote on this bill, as I'm not a part of the legislature, but I will say I see Sheriff Mike Smith here today. I see some teachers here today. My nephew is a firefighter. I guess I just want to say that I see you, and thank you for your service, and I appreciate all that you do for my kids and my community, and I know that these folks here do too, and I know there are strong feelings about this particular bill, and with that, I'll let Representative Brammer finish off.
Okay, so first of all, within the negotiations, I would say there were some negotiated pieces that were right on the edge, and I will say the police forces that were negotiating were awesome. They got the issue, and there was a compromise with police and fire that other union groups never got to. And it kind of spoiled a lot of the compromises that were out there. So you kind of have to remember that you're not just negotiating with one union or, it's like a bunch of them. And so there were negotiated solutions that were rejected by certain unions that made it so that in spite of having the bill and the votes the entire time, it was left there to try to get to that negotiation, to try to help, alleviate some of the concerns, and some groups never got on board, and therefore it was not going to be a some but not all. The second thing I would say is one of the most interesting pieces of this is the number one thing that teachers want out of their union is the liability coverage that the union provides when they get sued. And so one of the good things in this bill, and union dues are about $80 per month for a teacher typically. So, but we were able to, so the state has its own insurance, and we were able to do an insurance pool that allows the teachers to get all of that insurance, instead of for $80 a month, about $150 to $200 for the year if they want to pay for it separately. So they can get that primary benefit of the union, and that insurance policy is in their name instead of the union's, so they can have their own protection and demand their own insurance to protect them in the case of liability. That's a big, big deal. So now a teacher that wants that, but doesn't want the rest of the union stuff, doesn't want their union dues going to the National Education Association, which is pushing all kinds of junk, in which the unions will not disclose how much of their dues are going to the national groups that are pushing policies that are damaging our kids. Now they can buy that for themselves, they can buy it through the state, and they can save themselves about $600 to $800 per year, okay? So that's a really important piece. The last thing I would say is the local education unions, I don't have an issue with the Alpine Education Association. I think they've generally done a good job. The UEA, most of the gains in education have been done in spite of the UEA, not because of the UEA, okay? And one of the things that you need to realize is, as of about 6 years ago, Utah's average teacher pay and starting teacher pay was the lowest of any state that touched us. And now it is the highest of any state that touched us. And that is not because of any union negotiation through collective bargaining. It is because the legislature, rather than saying, we're going to give you this block grant and you can negotiate how much goes to teachers, we said, we're done with you not negotiating effectively for the teachers. We are going to directly allocate this money to the teachers. We raised their salaries. They're now the union, or the average teacher salary in Utah is now the highest of any state that touches our borders. We are the highest. The average starting teacher pay is number 10 in the nation, and we are the highest teacher pay. Now our per pupil spending is still low. That's true, because we have very little property to tax, and that's a big part of that, and we have a lot of students per taxpayer because we have larger families than usual. But as far as our teacher pay, we're doing better than Colorado, a deep blue state, or it's gone from red to purple to blue. We're doing better, we're doing better than Arizona, better than Nevada, better than Idaho, better than Wyoming, okay? And even when you take into account consumer price index, we're still doing better than all of those other states that touch us. So to pretend that we are not taking care of teachers is simply false. What we have found is that the unions don't negotiate well for the teachers, and it's the legislature that has to come in and push their salaries up, because the unions, which this bill was opposed by the Utah State School Board Association, who the unions are negotiating with, which take that, that's a big deal. They weren't getting the deals that we were hoping for our teachers. And so, what purpose were they serving in those collective bargaining instances? They were not. The gains they have been because of direct appropriations by the legislature over the last few years. So that's why I support that bill.
The unions actually opposed it.
Which, and those direct salary contributions, you know who opposed it? The UEA, the unions. They opposed giving teachers more direct pay in each of those instances. So they have not been serving our teachers well. That's the point. It's a false blanket of security, and our teachers can do so much better, and we can do so much better by them than the unions have been doing by them.
Thank you very much. I hope you all could see some of the passion that these folks have for what they do. I enjoy that. I appreciate it. They've expended a tremendous amount of energy. You know, some folks don't just work a couple of months. We know that maybe you're at it all year round. In fact, everybody really is. We call this session only, 45 days. Those who know that it's not a 45-day job. There's a lot of work that goes on in between. We appreciate you taking the time, joining us here, meeting with your constituents. There were a lot of questions out there that we didn't get to just because of time and maybe my time management, probably that. However, I'd encourage everyone to reach out to your representatives. They can be reached by email, they can be reached, they have the unsung heroes at the legislature are the interns who, you know, I'm not sure exactly how much time they're going to have the last couple of weeks, but they can also arrange chances to have conversations. Some of these fine folks may have a few minutes here at the end that they would be willing to meet with you to address the things that I either glossed over, misrepresented, or just didn't get to that you feel passionately about. Again, thank you so much. We want to thank the hospital one more time for providing this venue for us. They've been a fantastic community partner. We appreciate that so much. I also believe that there are a few breakfasts over there that are packaged up and ready to go, which is kind of nice. And thank you all for being here.